From Monsters, a screenplay by Walter Dean Myers. When Steve Harmon finds himself in jail, he turns his life into a running screenplay. They say you get used to being in jail, but I don't see how. Every morning I wake up and I am surprised to be here. If your life outside was real, then everything in here is just the opposite. We sleep with strangers. We wake up with strangers. We go to the bathroom in front of strangers. They're strangers, but they find reasons to hurt each other. Sometimes I feel like I have walked into the middle of a movie. It is a strange movie with no plot and no beginning. The movie is in black and white and grainy. Sometimes the camera moves in so close that you can't tell what is going on with you. Just listen to the sounds and guess. I have seen movies of prisons, but never one like this. This is not a movie about bars and locked doors. It is about being alone when you are not really alone, and about being scared all the time. I think to get used to this, I will have to give up what I think is real and take up something else. I wish I could make sense of it. Maybe I could make my own movie. I could write it out and play it in my head. I could block out the scenes like we did in school. The film will be the story of my life. No, not my life, but of this experience. I'll write it down in the notebook they let me keep. I'll call it what the lady who is the prosecutor called me, Monster. Monday, July 6th. Fade in, interior. Early morning in cell, Block D, Manhattan Detention Center. Camera goes slowly down grim gray corridor. There are sounds of inmates yelling from cell to cell. Much of it is obscene. Most of the voices are clearly Black or Hispanic. Camera stops and slowly turns towards a cell. Interior cell. 16-year-old Steve Harmon is sitting on the edge of a metal cot, head in hands. He is thin, brown skinned. On the cot next to him are the suit and tie he is to wear to court for the start of the trial. Cut to Aaron, another prisoner, sitting on John, pants down. Cut to Sunset, another prisoner, pulling on t-shirt. Cut to Steve, pulling blankets over his head as screen goes dark. Voiceover. Ain't no use putting a blanket over your head, man. You can't cut this out. This is reality. This is the real deal. Voiceover continues with ominous prisoners explaining how the detention center is the real thing. As he does, the words appear on the screen, just like the opening credits of the movie Star Wars, rolling from the bottom of the screen and shrinking until they are a blur at the top of the screen before rolling off into space. Monster, the story of my miserable life, starring Steve Harmon, produced by Steve Harmon, directed by Steve Harmon's. Credits continue to roll. The incredible story of how one guy's life was turned around by a few events and how he might spend the rest of his life behind bars, told as accurately told as it actually happened. Written and directed by Steve Harmon, featuring Sandra Porcelli, the dedicated prosecutors, Kathy O'Brien, the defense attorney with doubts, James Keene as the thug, Richard Bobo Evans as the rat, Avzia Cruz, member of the Diablos, as the tough guy wannabe, L'Oreal Henry as the witness, Jose Delago, he found the body. And starring 16-year-old Steve Harmon, filmed at the Manhattan Detention Center. Set design, handcuffs, and prison outfits by the state of New York. Voiceover. Yo, Harmon, you got to eat something. Come on, you getting your breakfast, man? I'll take your eggs if you don't want them. You want them? Steve, I'm not hungry. Sunset. His trial starts today. He's up for the big one. I know how that feels. Cut to interior corruption detention van. Through the bars at the rear of the van, we see people going about the business of their lives in downtown New York. There are men collecting garbage, a female traffic officer motioning for a taxi to make a turn, students on the way to school. Few people notice the van as it makes its way from the detention center to the courthouse. Cut to prisoners, handcuffed, coming from back of the van. Steve is carrying a notebook. He is dressed in the suit and tie we saw on the cot. He is seen only briefly as he is herded through the heavy doors of the courthouse. Fade out as last prisoner from the van enters rear of courtroom. Fade in interior courthouse. We are in a small room used for prisoners' lawyer interviews. A guard sits at a desk behind Steve. Kathy O'Brien, Steve's lawyer, is petite, red hair, and freckled. She is all business as she talks to Steve. O'Brien. Let me make sure you understand what's going on. Both you and this King character are on trial for felony murder. Felony murder is as serious as it gets. Sandra Petroli is the prosecutor, and she's good. They're pushing for the death penalty, which is really bad. The jury might think they're going to do a big favor by giving you life in prison. So you better take the trial very, very serious. When you're in court, you sit there and you pay attention. You let the jury know that you think the case is as serious as they do. You don't turn and wave to any of your friends. That it's all right to acknowledge your mother. I have to go and talk to the judge. The trial will begin in a few minutes. Is there anything you want me to ask before it starts? Steve, do you think we're going to win? O'Brien. It probably depends upon what you mean by win. Cut to interior holding room. We see Steve sitting at one end of bench. Against the opposite wall, dressed a sloppy-looking suit, is 23-year-old James King, the other man on trial. King looks older than 23. He looks over at Steve with a hard look, and we see Steve look away. Two guards sit at a table away from the prisoner, who are handcuffed. The camera finds the guards. In a medium shot, they have their breakfast in aluminum trays that contain eggs, sausage, and potatoes. A black female stenographer pours coffee for herself and the guards. Stenographer. I hope this case lasts 2 weeks. I can sure use the money. Guard 1. 6 days, maybe 7. It's a motion case. They go through the motions, then they lock them up. Turns and looks off camera towards Steve. Ain't that right, bright blue? Cut to Steve, who is seated on a low bench. He is handcuffed to a U-bolt put in the bench for that purpose. Steve looks away from the guard. Cut to the door. It opens, and court clerk looks in. Court clerk. 2 minutes. Cut to guards, who hurried finished breakfast. Stenographer takes machine into courtroom. They unshackle Steve and take him towards door. Cut to Steve is made to sit down at one table. At another table, we see King and two attorneys. Steve sits alone. A guard stands behind him. There are one or two prosecutors in the courtroom. Then, four more enter. Close up of Steve Harmon. The fear is evident on his face. MS. People are getting ready for the trial to begin. Kathy O'Brien sits next to Steve. O'Brien. How are you doing? Steve. I'm scared. O'Brien. Good. You should be. Anyway, just remember what we've been talking about. The judge is going to rule on a motion that King's lawyer made to suppress Cruz's testimony and a few other things. Steve, let me tell you what a job is here. My job is to make sure the law works for you as well as against you, and to make you a human being in the eyes of the juror. Your job is to help me. Any questions you have, write them down, and I'll try to answer them. What are you doing here? Steve, I'm writing this whole thing down as a movie. O'Brien, whatever. Make sure you pay attention. Close attention. Courtroom guard, all rise.